The snow fell in slow, silent sheets, like memories trying to settle where they once belonged. It layered over the forgotten sidewalks, softened the jagged edges of old brick buildings, and buried the sharp sounds of the world until all that was left was hush. Jacob leaned on the rusted rail of the small bridge, a paper bag of takeout growing cold in his hands. Across the frozen creek, children's laughter echoed faintly sharp like distant chimes, hollowed by the wind. He didn't look. He didn't have it in him today. His boots were soaked from slush, and the worn collar of his coat no longer rose high enough to keep the cold from biting his neck. He didn't move, though. There was something about this hour dusk stretching long and blue across the sky, street lamps flickering awake with a quiet buzz that always held him there. Between going home and staying gone, home was a rented one-bedroom near the edge of town where silence hung like a weight and the walls still whispered her name. Not loudly, just enough. Just enough to remind him of laughter that once echoed down the hall and tiny feet that used to race to greet him. Now he brought food for one. Sat in a chair that used to be hers and placed napkins for hands that never came. Sometimes he tried not to remember. But memories have a way of creeping back when it snows, when the world slows down and nothing distracts from the ache. A gust of wind pulled at his scarf. He shifted, sighed, and turned toward the narrow alley shortcut. When he heard it, a voice small, tentative, not quite a cry, not quite a word, Sir? He stopped. Behind a half-collapsed fence, in the shadow of an old storage unit, something moved, not fast, not demanding. Just there. May we have that? He turned. It wasn't the voice that stopped his breath, it was the eyes behind. 5 of them, no taller than his waist. Kids, shadows, bundled in mismatched coats and wrapped in the kind of desperation that didn't beg, just waited. The oldest, maybe 10, stood in front. She didn't flinch when he looked at her. She didn't smile, either. But her eyes quiet, bruised with worry, watched the bag in his hand like it was firelight. He didn't answer right away. His fingers gripped the paper sack tighter than he realized. It had taken him 20 minutes to pick this up. A special hot soup, warm bread, a bit of pie. He had told himself it would make the evening feel less empty. Like maybe, just maybe, dinner could still mean something. But now, he stepped closer. Slowly, like approaching a deer caught in wire. How long have you been out here? He asked, voice rough from disuse. The girl looked at the others before answering. A boy with chapped cheeks shuffled behind her, clutching a little one to his side. Another girl, freckles, curly hair flattened by a too thin hat, nodded toward him, as if granting him permission to come closer. Just till Mama comes back, the girl whispered. That stopped him again. It wasn't what she said it was. How she said it? Not hopeful, not angry, just practiced. Like it was something she'd said before, to herself, to them. Maybe to no one? May I ask your name? He managed. Elsie, she said. He knelt. Slowly, carefully. His knees cracked louder than the wind. I'm Jacob. He said. She nodded, but her eyes never left the bag. He looked down at it, then back at them. All right, he said, as softly as the snow falling around them. Let's find somewhere warm. He didn't plan to say it. The words just came, like they'd been waiting for years to find a way out. Elsie didn't smile, but her fingers, trembling, red, loosened their fists. And behind her, one of the little ones sniffled and stepped forward. Jacob led them, slowly, toward the back of a diner still flickering with life. They sat beneath the awning, just out of the wind, and shared the food, small bites. Cautious hands, silent gratitude. He didn't ask questions. Not then. Questions could wait. Instead, he watched the way they huddled together. How Elsie broke her bread in half before she took a bite. How the youngest boy nestled into her side like it was the safest place in the world. And for a moment, just a moment, the silence in him shifted. Like something long frozen had cracked, ever so slightly. The snow kept falling, but now it caught the glow of the diner light. It shimmered, just a little. Jacob didn't speak again that night. Not much needed saying, but as the wind carried away the scent of shared soup, and the children dozed against one another, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper, old, worn soft at the edges. A letter he hadn't read in years, He looked at it. Then looked at them, and without knowing why, he placed it gently beside Elsie before he stood. He didn't leave yet, but something inside him had already started to turn. It snowed less the next morning, but the cold had sunk deeper into the bones of the city. The streets glistened with thin sheets of ice that cracked like brittle porcelain under passing boots. Jacob woke earlier than he had in weeks, and for a moment he forgot why. Then he saw the extra blanket folded on the couch. Not his. Not from his home, a small woolen square, worn at the edges, and faintly smelling of pine and smoke, He stood still, barefoot on cold floorboards, listening for something he hadn't expected to hear again. Soft breath, a rustle, a whisper. And he heard it. They were still here. He walked slowly into the living room. Heart tightened in his chest like someone else's memory was stitched into his own. There they were. Curled on the floor in a nest of old quilts and jackets. 5. Children sleeping so close they looked like a single heartbeat wrapped in threadbare warmth. Elsie stirred first. Her eyes blinked open without surprise, just calm watchfulness. She didn't ask questions, didn't look afraid. Just met his gaze and sat up, careful not to wake the others. They were cold, she whispered. He nodded. So was I, She looked away. He saw her knuckles again, red and cracked. She must have given her coat to one of the little ones. He didn't ask. Instead, he motioned to the kitchen. There's tea on the stove, and there's oatmeal if you want. She didn't move immediately, as if waiting for the moment to pass, or perhaps for him to change his mind. But when he didn't, she rose and padded in slowly, socks too thin for the floor. Every step small and silent. He watched her stir the oatmeal, hands too careful for her age. Where's your mother? He asked finally, gently. Elsie didn't stop stirring. She said she had to go make something right. She said it might take a few nights, but we'd be all right. He swallowed. And it's been how many nights? Elsie looked at the spoon. This is the 4th. Jacob looked at the doorway where the others still slept. One of them coughed softly in their sleep, curling tighter. She left you with nothing? Elsie's voice was quiet. She left us with hope. He said nothing. Because he remembered what it was like to believe someone meant well, even when the road they took left you standing in the snow. He remembered the echo of footsteps that never turned back. Later, as the sun reached higher and the house warmed slightly, Jacob brought out an old shoebox from his closet. Inside, a mess of old letters, ticket stubs, a photograph with edges worn white. He wasn't sure why he brought it out. Just that something inside him stirred when he looked at Elsie pouring tea into mismatched mugs for her siblings. He set the box on the table. She noticed, but didn't ask. Instead, when her youngest brother finally woke tears on his cheeks and fingers, too stiff to rub them away, she knelt beside him and whispered something in his ear, a story maybe, or a promise. And then Jacob finally asked, "Do you have a place you call home?" She looked at him, not with surprise, but with something harder. No, she said, but we carry pieces of it. He didn't know what to say to that, so he walked to the fireplace. It hadn't been used since laughter had filled this house. He opened the flue, checked the woodpile, and knelt to build a flame. The fire took slowly, reluctantly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome anymore. But he coaxed it with care, small touches, quiet patience. The children drifted toward it one by one. No one asked. They just moved. By evening, the living room was alive with a kind of hush that felt sacred, not noisy, not joyful, but whole in a way Jacob hadn't felt in years. Elsie sat nearest the fire, watching it like she knew what it meant to carry warmth when the world didn't give it freely. Asterisk Jacob brought out canned soup, crackers, and apple each. They ate without talking. The youngest spilled some on the rug and looked terrified, but Jacob just handed him a napkin. Asterisk, you all right? He asked gently. Asterisk, the boy nodded so fast his curls bounced. He couldn't have been older than 4, asterisk, that night. After they settled again into their makeshift camp, Elsie approached him as he stood by the back door, watching snow fall beneath the porch light. You don't talk much, she said. He offered a half smile. Words didn't do much for me before. Asterisk, she nodded like she understood. Mama used to say silence is sometimes safer. He looked at her. Do you believe that? Asterisk, Elsie hesitated, then shook her head. I think silence can also make people disappear. He looked away, into the snow. Then he opened the door. Asterisk, cold wind surged in. But he didn't close it yet. Asterisk, he stepped out onto the porch, stood in the snow barefoot for a second, like testing something. She followed, curious but quiet. Asterisk, he pointed up. Asterisk, stars, scattered and sharp, glowing cold against the black sky. Asterisk, I used to tell her stories about constellations, he said, voice low. Asterisk, Elsie tilted her head. Your daughter? Asterisk, he didn't answer. Not with words, asterisk, but the ache in his throat said yes. Asterisk, Elsie didn't ask more. She just looked at the stars a while longer, asterisk, and then, with all the weight of someone older than her years, she whispered, asterisk, we could stay for just one more night. He nodded, but inside something was already beginning to shift again. Asterisk, like maybe silence didn't have to mean disappearance. Maybe warmth didn't have to be temporary. Maybe hope, once left behind, could find its way back, asterisk, even barefoot, even broken, even in the snow. It was on the 3rd night that Jacob found the photograph. Asterisk, he hadn't meant to. He was searching for extra blankets in the back of the hall closet, a closet he hadn't opened in months, when his fingers brushed against a stiff envelope tucked behind a stack of old Christmas lights. Asterisk, it slid out easily. Unassuming, yellowed slightly at the corners. No address, no stamp, just his name in familiar, looping handwriting. Asterisk, he didn't open it. Not yet, asterisk, the weight of it settled in his hand. Like something living, something waiting. And suddenly, the air felt too tight in his lungs. Asterisk, down the hall. He heard laughter soft and strange in the house that had forgotten how to hold it. Asterisk, the children had taken to drawing by the fire. Jacob had given them old bills and receipts to scribble on, a few stubby pencils from the drawer by the sink. He hadn't realized how much they needed it, how quiet and focused they became when given a corner of peace. Asterisk, Elsie had drawn a cabin, not unlike this one, with a curl of smoke rising from the chimney and 5 stick figures inside. One outside, that 6th one he knew, was her mother. He watched her trace the lines carefully, as if drawing could call the woman back. Asterisk, later that evening, when the fire had softened to embers and the youngest 2 had fallen asleep in a shared pile of quilts, Jacob brought the envelope back into the room. Asterisk, Elsie saw it in his hand and said nothing. But her eyes lingered on it. Asterisk, he sat in the armchair beside the fire, stared at the sealed flap like it might vanish if he blinked too long. He opened it. Slowly. Asterisk, the letter inside was short. Jacob, if you're reading this, it means I'm not where I should be. I'm sorry for what I left you with. I tried to hold on, I did. But sorrow has teeth, and I was tired of bleeding. Asterisk, you loved her, and I know you tried to love me too. Thank you for not turning away, even when I did. Thank you for holding on. When I let go, asterisk, if there's still light in you, find a way to give it. Don't let grief become your home. Build something out of the ashes, even if it's small. Even if it's only for a while, she would have wanted that. Asterisk, Jacob didn't cry. Asterisk, but something loosened in his chest. Like a knot pulled too tight for too long, finally slipping free. Asterisk, Elsie had come closer, quiet as always. Her gaze brushed over the letter without asking. Then she sat beside him, knees pulled to her chest, and leaned against his arm. Asterisk, he didn't move, didn't flinch, just breathed. Asterisk, outside, the wind had risen. Snow swirled against the windows like it was trying to remember how to fall. The fire hissed softly, as if whispering secrets in a language only warmth could understand. Jacob folded the letter carefully, slipped it into the shoebox now sitting beneath the coffee table. Your mother, he said after a while. What's her name? Elsie didn't answer right away. Then, gently, she whispered, June. He nodded. And your last name? She looked at him then, really looked. There was a pause. Then, does it matter? He thought about that. No, he said, but it helps me remember that you're not just a story passing through. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. A crumpled note, torn at the corner. Folded so many times the paper was near transparent at the seams. She held it out. He opened it. Scrawled in a rushed hand were a few lines. Back soon. If not, find Mr. Cartwright, the man in the red house with the garden gate. He owes me one. Jacob stared at the name. Cartwright. He hadn't heard it in years. Not since before the fire. Not since the town still held shape around him. He looked. Up. Your mother knew Thomas Cartwright? Elsie nodded. She said he helped her once, a long time ago. Jacob rose from the chair, moved to the window. The snow had stopped again. Everything blanketed and still. Cartwright's house wasn't far. Just past the ridge, red with peeling paint. A garden gate leaning slightly, like it had been waiting too long for someone to come through it. He turned back to Elsie. I'll go tomorrow, he said. Her brow furrowed. You'll leave us? He knelt before her, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. No, I'll walk toward something this time. Not away, and then he added, You'll come with me if you want? She looked at her siblings, curled and sleeping, cheeks pink from warmth and trust they hadn't felt in days. And for the first time, her voice broke just a little when she said, I want to... They didn't pack much that night, just blankets. The drawings, a bit of bread. The rest they'd leave behind. Grief, old ghosts, names they no longer had to carry alone. Jacob sat by the fire long after they fell asleep, the shoebox on his lap. Inside, beside the letters and photos, he placed something new. Elsie's drawing of the cabin, one fire. 5 hearts, and one more just outside the door. But not for long. The snow gave way to silence the next morning, the kind that made footsteps sound like whispers across the earth. The sky was pale and wide, the kind of cold blue that holds no warmth, but all the promise of change. Jacob stood at the door with a blanket over his shoulder, his boots laced tight for the first time in months. He hadn't slept much. Not from worry, but because something in his chest had begun to stir. Like the echo of something remembered or a heartbeat returning. Behind him, Elsie wrapped the youngest boy in 2 scarves. The others waited with quiet eyes and full hands, each one holding something small, a mitten, a pencil stub, a torn piece of drawing. Pieces of the life they'd built in 3 soft days. He held out his hand. Elsie didn't hesitate. The walk was slow. Not because of distance, but because none of them rushed. The cold was no longer a wall, it was just weather. And the world, for once, didn't feel like it was closing in. They reached the red house by mid-morning. The gate leaned, just like he remembered. A small wind chime tapped out a hollow tune on the porch. And there, in the window, a shadow moved. Thomas Cartwright opened the door with a wool cap in one hand and a tired smile that cracked wider when he saw Jacob. Well, he said softly, you're not a ghost after all. Jacob didn't answer. Right away, then, I almost was. Cartwright stepped aside without asking more. They went in. The house smelled of cedar and apples. Warmth wrapped around them like a coat they'd forgotten belonged. The fire was already going, low and steady. A kettle hummed on the stove. He poured them tea, waited. Elsie sat beside Jacob, her siblings tucked close around her like petals around a stem. When Cartwright finally spoke again. It wasn't with curiosity, but quiet understanding. She's gone? Jacob nodded. Cartwright looked down at his mug. She helped me once too. June. Gave me a coat when I came out of the hospital and had nothing but a name and a bruise. Asterisk Elsie's eyes widened slightly. Asterisk Cartwright glanced at her. Your mama. She saved people in quiet ways. Asterisk Elsie swallowed. She said she was coming back. Asterisk Cartwright didn't lie. Didn't pretend, asterisk, but he said, then maybe she still will. Asterisk silence filled the room again, but it wasn't hollow now. It was soft. Something shared? Asterisk Cartwright offered the spare room, food, rest. No questions asked. Asterisk that night, Jacob stood on the porch with a mug in his hands. Steam rose and vanished into the cold. Asterisk Elsie came out after the others had fallen asleep. Asterisk. She left because she thought it was the only way to make us better, she said quietly. Asterisk Jacob nodded. And maybe it was the only way she knew. Asterisk she was tired, Elsie whispered. He looked down at her. So was I. She leaned against his side. What now? She asked. He took a breath. We build something, he said. Even if it's small? She nodded. They stood like that for a long while. Asterisk. Then Elsie reached into her coat pocket again and handed him something new. Asterisk a piece of paper. Folded carefully, edges still warm from her hands. Jacob opened it. It was a new drawing. Asterisk the same. House, but this time the sixth figure was no longer outside. It stood at the center, asterisk, and beside it. A seventh. He didn't speak, just lowered himself down to one knee, still holding the picture, and wrapped his arms around her. Asterisk she held on. Tight as frost and twice as quiet. Asterisk and there, on the porch of a borrowed house with the wind finally. Soft. Jacob Cartwright understood what it meant to be found again. Asterisk not all at once. Not by thunder or by miracle. But by 5 quiet voices, and one pair of eyes that had asked for nothing only to be seen. Asterisk if this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from, because sometimes the smallest voices hold the power to call someone home.